So thank you everyone for joining today. My name's Joe. I'm from the RICS Matrics Kent committee. We've organised this APC panel event today. We've got Miles, Lewis and Sophie, who are recently chartered surveyors across different pathways. They will be introducing themselves to you. And we're also joined by David from Property Elite, who's going to be hosting the session today and posing some questions to the panel. So that will take up the first half of the session, and we've got some structured questions for the panel, and then we'll open it up to the audience to ask some questions. If I could ask that questions are posted into the chat, just to make life easier, and I'll be monitoring that throughout as well. So if everyone could remain muted and post questions into the chat, and then about halfway through the session, we'll start going through some of your questions and putting those to the panel as well. But without further ado, I'll pass over to David, and we can get underway.
Thank you, Joe, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm David Reynolds. Just to give a bit of a background to myself, I'm a quantity surveyor, project manager, run my own consultancy, Bloomsbury Project Management, and work for Property Elite, helping them out with assessments. But from your point of view, I'm actually an assessor for the RICS. I chair panels and act as an assessor. So I'm here today in that role to chair this panel. We have three willing, recently qualified chartered surveyors, Mark, Miles and Sophie. So briefly running through, it's a sort of quick fire around all these questions. So Mark, do you want to kick off? Just tell us a bit about yourself, your pathway, your employer, and when you passed your APC.
Sorry. I'm a senior building surveyor at Workman LLP, so I'm working within the building consultancy team. Joe Higgs is actually a colleague of mine at Workman as well. In terms of my pathway, I came through the building surveying pathway with RICS and passed my APC in June 2025. My day-to-day role is sort of a mix of project management and professional work, such as DLAPs, reinstatement cost assessment. So it gives me a good exposure across sort of several mandatory competencies.
Thank you very much. And Miles, just tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I'm Miles Rickson, and I work as MD QS at Calford, Seaden. So we work on the client side as PQS. So I've been working for Calford for about 7 years now, and I passed my APC on the QS pathway in November.
Thanks, Miles. And finally, Sophie.
Hi everyone, so my name is Sophie Rand and I am a commercial surveyor, so I'm a senior surveyor and I work on the landlord side. So I work for TfL, Transport for London, or as best known, Places for London now. And yeah, I did the commercial real estate pathway and I passed on the 17th, so very much closely to the anniversary to the date last year.
Excellent. The first year of being a chartered surveyor is always the most memorable, and then it fades into the distant past. Okay, let's kick off. Mark, first question. What aspect was the most challenging part of the APC process for you?
For me, the most challenging part was sort of trying to balance just full-time work and with structured revision. I think particularly making sure that you get that balance, switching off from work, blocking out that time, getting that in your diary, and clearly setting out those two areas where you're revising and where you're working is a key for me. I think that was probably the most difficult thing.
Were you doing that daily or weekly, or just crashed it once a month for a weekend?
No, I mean daily blocks, morning and evening, making sure I'd got maybe an hour in the morning and then some more time in the evening, a couple of hours extra in the evening to make sure that was set aside, because I'm sure we're all guilty of it, very easily run over from work, and then before you know it, your revision time is gone. So yeah,
absolutely,
that was important for me.
Thank you, Miles. What was the most challenging part of the APC process for yourself?
So for me, it would probably be just understanding the final interview, really. So there's obviously you get an hour to you're quizzed on your documents. So there's obviously a technique to how to answer questions, being succinct in your answering and essentially not sort of digressing from what the question you was asked. So for me, I arranged quite a few informal Q&As as well as sort of formal mocks and attended webinars on the final interview format.
So basically, practicing with mock interviews. That's how you overcome that challenge.
Yes.
Very good. So, Sophie, what about yourself? What was your most challenging aspect of your APC process?
I would probably say that it was a completely different revision style than what I had been previously used to. I think GCSE, A-level and uni, it was kind of very much you revise the content and you sort of spit it out on a piece of paper, whereas the APC is a completely different style of revision and a different style of questioning. So I would say that that's what I found the most challenging.
And how did you overcome that? Was it just sort
of? To be honest with you, I sort of split my sort of revision in half. So I essentially learned the sort of core theory to do with the textbook, and then I sort of created a Word document based on my submission. So I would title in red my examples, and then I would reference in the statute. Mine was obviously very legislation heavy. I took landlord and tenant and property management to level 3. So yeah, for me, it was kind of breaking it down in the revision and just knowing what they were looking for in the questioning.
Absolutely, that sounds good. Excellent. Okay. So next question, Mark, we'll kick off yourself again. Was there anything in particular that surprised you most about the APC process?
I think for me, probably it's more that it was more conversational rather than sort of an interview. I think once you understand that, I think it makes it a bit of an easier process. They're not trying to trip you up. It's sort of more of a, a leading conversation. I think for me, that was understanding that. And then once I understood that, it was helping me sort of then deliver the answers more succinctly.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The way I describe to people, it's not a sort of teacher-pupil examination. It is you're effectively having a meeting with the client and you're describing your project and the challenges you had. So it's more of a collegial discussion. That's how it's intended to be. Miles, what about yourself? Was there anything particular that surprised you about the APC process?
So for me, it's probably how structured the process actually was. So there's obviously a heavy focus on learning on the job because it's your experience you're being quizzed on. And compared to university, it's all sort of background reading, desktop studying. So I felt that was definitely worked in my favour more. But it was a little bit surprising how much it was focused on your experience and working on the job essentially.
Absolutely. The key thing there is that they can only ask you questions on your experience. So you're not going to get hypothetical questions in interviews. So that's why it's important to have that experience and document it correctly. And effectively, you're then creating the questions that you're going to get asked. So now that absolutely, Miles. Sophie, was anything particularly yourself that you surprised you about the APC process?
Probably how quickly the hour goes and how little time you actually spend in the grander scheme of things of how much time you probably put into the preparation for it. The actual time you have on the physical day on each of the sections is actually very small and the hour goes so quickly.
Absolutely. I say to people, it's not an hour because the first 10 minutes you're actually given a presentation yourself and you're not interrupted during that time. So the actual interview, the questioning is only 50 minutes. And I think during that time, you'll be subjected, I use the word sort of carefully, to between 60 to 80 questions. So it is quite rapid, quite quick. And the time does pass very quickly, even for the assessors, I can assure you. So thank you for that. Okay, moving on. Next question. Is there anything that you would do differently now, knowing what you know about the APC process? So having now gone through the APC process, what would you do differently now if you were sort of, starting again today?
I think definitely for me, I see this a lot as well. speaking to other people who are going through the process now, they're heavily focused on technical revision, whereas I think you really need to be getting those mock interviews in as soon as possible. I can't sort of emphasize that enough, really, getting that, you know, pressure and time, skill set, everything, delivery of your answers succinctly within a mock interview is so important, because obviously that's exactly how you're going to deliver it in the real interview. So getting those in practice and get that imperfect is so important.
Absolutely. And Miles, yourself, what would you do differently if you were perish the thought having to start all over again?
Yeah, agree with everything Mark's just said there. So for me, including mocks as well, is arranging informal Q&As. So it could just be with your colleagues. It's almost, to some extent, you want to practice not getting an answer wrong, but an answer you maybe don't know, and where to find that answer. And I suppose on that point, for me, it was maybe focus on my shortfall competencies or my weaker points, just so I had that sort of base level of confidence was maybe a bit higher on the shortfall areas.
Absolutely. I think it's a mock does flag these things up, because it's only under pressure that you then realise what you don't know, as it were. So, Sophie, what would you do differently if you started all over again?
To be honest with you, I don't think I'd have done too much differently. I think I went a little bit overboard with mocks, that I think I ended up being the first day, and I think it was a good thing I was the first day, because I think I would have probably burnt out if I was later on in the sitting. But really, just everyone tells you it, and I think it sort of sometimes goes in one ear and you're like, yeah, 100% is know your submission back to front. I think you can easily learn the wider stuff, learn what's going on in RICS, what RICS are doing, and yes, that's all really important, but your submission, like, absolutely know it back to front, left, right, center of why you did those things. And I think, yeah, I mean, it worked out, but yeah, I think that's probably what I would have focused maybe a little bit more of my time on if I'd have done it again or differently.
Absolutely. What I say to people is that when they actually make their submission, which normally is, say, like in March, and the interviews are in June, you then don't, as you said there, Sophie, you don't want to learn anything new, no new theory, no new subjects, but just revise what you have submitted, and also every potential question that could come out of that, because ultimately they will ask questions on your submission, and the assessors, they only have your submission to read before they actually meet you, so they can only ask you questions on what you have submitted. So that's yeah, I think Sophie, you've nailed that one very well. Okay, next question. How did you balance work, study, and APC preparation? We picked up on this slightly, but what you mentioned there, Mark, that you actually you did a bit every day. Did you do that at work or on the way to work, on the train commuting, or how did you actually sort of balance that with work?
Yeah. Sorry, David, it's actually Lewis, but
sorry, Lewis.
No, it's no problem. No, it's fine. I think people see my surname and they get confused anyway, so it's fine. I think for me it would be probably treating each of the stages sort of as a milestone. I think you've got to see them each one as a gateway. So I think your submission date completed, your case study sort of final draft and things, then your mock interview schedule, get those blocks in, and then from there you can time the other bits and pieces in. So your other mock interviews, your other Q&As and bits and pieces, and just get those all scheduled out. I think that's probably the best thing that I could say.
Thank you. Miles, what would you how did you balance your work study as part of your APC preparation?
So I put together my own sort of personalised study plan. So for me, it was always an hour before work, an hour at lunch, and then come at the end of the day, I sort of log off and try and almost forget about it until the next day. I think as well as that, I think it's crucial to schedule in breaks as well, because the last thing I think you want to do is obviously burning out before the final assessment.
And when you were studying, were you doing like you picked one competency and just focused on it for the day? Is that when you said you had a little plan? I mean, is that how you made that work?
Yeah, so what I would do is essentially each week would have one competency. So I'd focus on the level 3s first, and then some weeks it'll be level 1s and level 2s. I'd make sure I'd keep changing those competencies to ensure they remain interested, and I was still driven to study for that competency.
Thank you. And so, Sophie, how do you balance study and work as part of your preparation?
Yeah, I mean, my counsellor is actually my line manager, which I think massively helped. So it was we have quite a good working relationship where she would provide me with time and flexibility, but I know that's also not always the case. But yeah, for me, it was similar to what both Miles and Lewis have said, in the sense of morning, after work. I also found having sort of content I just couldn't memorize or wrap my head round on flashcards, so that if I had some spare time, I would just flick through those at lunchtime or on the train in, the commute time. Now I just don't do anything. Now that I think I've spent all of my commutes in just revising, that now I'm just sort of enjoying my commute in. But that again is sort of just time where you're not really doing anything, but you can make use of it. So yeah, that's what I did.
Absolutely. So I think if it's putting the hours in, put them in regularly, and the analogy I use to people, if you go to the gym every day, it's a lot easier than if you go to the gym once a week, because if you go to the gym once a week, the next 3 days you're as stiff as anything, sort of thing, and you're suffering. So little and often is the best way. Okay, Lewis, in your opinion, what do you feel makes a strong summary of experience? So this is obviously your written submission against each of the competencies. What do you feel makes a strong summary of experience?
Yeah, so I think for each competency, you just want to be making sure that you're hitting each of those evidence-based sort of markers that they're giving you in your pathway guide. So making sure it's clearly demonstrates level 1 to 3. Just give them those points succinctly, and just give them some projects where you've clearly demonstrated it. I think that's probably key. And just show you've demonstrated professional judgment, not just gone through a process. Because I think I've seen and I've reviewed a few where people just sort of write about what they've done rather than talk about the actual judgment they've made and why they've come to that conclusion and why they advise the client that way.
Yeah, so that's a focus on level 3, isn't it? That's the key.
Yes,
there. You have to show where you've given advice. That's the key thing with level 3, and ultimately that's where the assessors are going to be looking to question you as a starting point in the interview. Miles, what about yourself? What do you feel makes a strong summary of experience?
I think try and use sort of several different projects rather than try to stick to sort of 1 and 2 projects. And also it's your experience, so try not to say copy it from a colleague's submission or even use AI, because it is your summary, and as Sophie's already said, you need to know your submission back and front. So I think for me is using a few different projects rather than sticking to the same couple of projects.
That's a good point. I mean, firstly, I'll say it now before everyone gets too excited. You are not allowed to use AI as part of your submission, and in fact the RICS does have software which, when submissions come in, they can actually use it to check whether AI was used or not. So you're not actually allowed to use AI. With regard to your actual projects, as Miles said there, I've known some candidates only work on one project. So for instance, they may have been working on, say, like HS2 or something for 4 or 5 years, because it's a massive project. However, within that one project, you may have lots of smaller projects. So it could have been HS2 retaining wall, or HS2 station forecourt, or HS2 tunnel, you see. So you want to make up different sort of areas of the project within one big project, if you've got it, and then spread it across the experience. If your case study, you can reflect that in your summary experience, but you want to try and introduce other projects as well. That's the key, just to show your breadth of experience during your training. Sophie, what about yourself from your sort of pathway? What did you feel made a strong summary of experience?
I would say there's probably 2 things. I think good use of hooks in when you're writing your summary of experience, which I think comes with time. You can kind of somewhat try and control. You can't fully control, because at the end of the day, you've got no control over who your assessors are or what their specialism is. But I would say a submission that tries to rig a line of questioning. And my other thing would be, I mean, in my case, commercial real estate, mine was very landlord and tenant heavy, property management, so very legislation heavy. I would say it's slightly controversial, but a very vanilla submission. You don't want something that is massively opening you up to all kinds of different case law, disputes, absolutely everything. I would say a very boring as such. You obviously want to have some challenges to it, but something where you can kind of control where the questioning goes, because if it was straightforward, my usual thought would be, well, if you didn't agree the rent, where would it go third party? What's the route? So I think, yeah, it's kind of trying to control where you want to steer the questioning would be my sort of advice.
Okay, so could you just wanted to give an example of a hook then? You mentioned a hook. I mean, some people on the call may not know what you really mean by a hook. So what's an example then of on the level 3 submission? What would you have said?
So for instance, with level 3, I won't use one that's specific to say what I do, because it might not be applicable to everybody. But for instance, you may say, I specifically advised this advice to my client based on following this legislation, full stop. Or it might be, in accordance with the lease, I advised my client X. So
and then the assessor would then say, can you expand on why you gave that advice?
Exactly.
And why did you do that? Absolutely.
That kind of thing, which again comes with time as you sort of prepare your case study and your summary of experience.
I mean, just to pick up on the non-controversial point there, I was reading someone's submission as part of their preparation, so it wasn't the assessment. And I think one of their key issues was the client was accused of money laundering, you see. And I said, well, that's not really a key issue. That's a subject you don't really want to bring into your final assessment, because obviously it opens up lots of other ethical questions. So you're absolutely right. Certainly a vanilla submission, which just keeps it very simple and very straightforward, allows the questioning to flow better, and ultimately just gives it a more of a fair chance of answering the questions. So great. Thank you. Okay, moving on now. Next question. Lewis, how do you choose your case study, and what are assessors looking for in the case study? So first of all, just give a very brief, don't have to give detail, but what was, for a building surveying point of view, what was your actual case study on? Just give people an idea.
Yeah, my case study was on sort of refurb of a retail unit down in Wimbledon. So it was strip out. So my two key issues were some issues with some water ingress, so looking at options for replacement or patch repairs to a roof, and the other key issue was to do with asbestos, so removal or encapsulation, and the decisions made for that. So I think when it comes to choosing it, you just want to be able to demonstrate clearly level 3 to them within your case study, your reasoning on your two different key issues, and then in terms of what the assessors are looking for, I think, just again, clear, reasoned advice, and how you've come to that professional judgment at the end of those key issues, basically.
And was that a project at what time in your year was that actual project you worked on? Was it one at the start of the year before, or have you been on it a while, or?
Yeah, no, it was a project I'd started a year before, and I sort of finished probably about 6 months before I sat my APC. So it didn't have to be one, very near. Excuse me.
So the just so everyone knows, you have to have worked on your case study within 2 years of. So if you're taking your APC, say this June, if your case study was from 2023, that wouldn't be acceptable. It has to be one you've worked on in the last 2 years. Miles, how did you choose your case study, and what did you feel the assessors were looking for when they were asking you questions?
So the way I chose my case study, I essentially kept a log. So I, on my sort of key projects, kept a log of any potential issues that popped up. So then I was regularly reviewing this with my counsellor to sort of come to two key issues. So in terms of what the assessor would be looking for, I think again, yeah, what Lewis just said is you're advising, you're familiar with the key issue and what the basically what options you chose to essentially fix that issue. So yeah, as long as you're familiar with your submission, case study, and the option you chose and recommended, and I think that's a big part of that case study.
Excellent. And what was your one of the questions they ask in interview was, or I ask is, what was your role? So did you have a senior role, or were you totally responsible for that project, or did you have a line manager working with you on the project? So how did you answer that?
Yeah, so I had a senior role, but I wasn't. But I also had basically a partner in charge working alongside me. But yeah, it was a senior. I was sort of the face of that project for the QS degree, and yeah, I was managing throughout that process.
Yeah, and I think the key thing there is, which clearly you did in your interview, is when you answer questions, is I did this, I did that.
Yeah.
You don't say we, i.e. myself and all the rest of the team. It's the interview is very much about you personally. So it's in the singular is how you respond to interview. Sophie, how did you choose your case study, and what were the assessors looking for when it came to questioning?
So my case study was a protected lease renewal, so a 54 Act lease. I chose this purely because I felt very comfortable with protected leases and quite comfortable with the 54 Act. But it also covered so many different competencies as well. So that's why I chose that, because it was right from the start. When you inspect, you value, you work with legal to serve the notice, you negotiate, and you complete the lease. So it's quite a long process. My two key issues were the calculation of market rent. There was a real lack of comparables at the time, and how I essentially navigated that. And then the second key issue was essentially the different notices I could have served, and why I didn't serve a certain type of notice. So yeah, I would say what the assessors, or what you should really look for when you're choosing your case study, is what you actually feel confident and speaking about. Don't try and just pick something because you worked on it a long time, or someone's telling you you should be doing that. Pick something that you feel comfortable speaking about. At the end of the day, it's you in front of the panel, not someone else. But obviously do pick something that doesn't open you up.
Absolutely. Good. Okay, Lewis, back to yourself. Are there any pathway specific hot topics you encountered or recommend councillors look over? So from your building surveying point of view, are there any specific hot topics which, not so much when you did it a year ago, but even today, what do you think's hot topics from a building surveying point of view?
Yeah, I think there's always been an emphasis on fire, but more around high risk buildings now, and understanding them and the categories. So making sure you understand what constitutes a high risk building. And then I think more of a trend for going forward into the new APC processes, I think ESG and sustainability is far more a focus on that going forward now as well. So I think that would be a topic I'd be looking at if I was particularly going through my APC now.
That's good. Miles, yourself, from a QS perspective?
Yeah, so I suppose quite relevant at the moment is the current market conditions. Obviously, what's happening on in the world with the conflicts in the Middle East and so on, and how that affects build cost, and how in our estimates we're managing the risk and things like that. So they're two hot topics. There's also the same as what Liz just said about sustainability, but linked to how, as a QS, or how your pathway is, how you can have an impact on sustainability.
That's correct. Good, very good. And Sophie, what about yourself? What's happening in the land of leasehold reforms at the moment? So giving you a bit of a lead there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the reform going on. I'm specifically in commercial, so I would say the landlord and tenant 54 Act, the consultation that's going on, which is the most leading piece of legislation. Also the rates revaluation taking place from 1st of April this year, and also the plans for what's coming in 27, but also AI. I know RICS have recently put out some sort of standards on AI, and it's a very big thing that impacts the whole industry.
Right. Okay. Right. The next question, Miles is sorry, Lewis, is how did your APC compare to your expectations? There you go. So when you the day after, when you've sort of come up from the euphoria of the experience, how did it match your expectations, or is it? I didn't think it would be like that.
I thought it was quite intense, obviously, going through the process. But I think in terms of the interview, yeah, I think as we discussed earlier, it sort of flew by. I think it's just making sure you focus on each question, don't dwell on the last question, and you know, even if you think you maybe answered a question, you know, poorly, don't try and dwell on that. Move on and just refocus on the next question that they're asking you. But yeah, it just feels very quick.
So there was nothing surprising. You didn't think, oh, I didn't think it'd be like that, or I didn't think they'd ask me that sort of thing. Was there any curveballs in there?
I mean, there are a few questions that I hadn't been asked, because obviously, you know, everyone always produces different questions from your mocks. But again, coming back to what we discussed earlier, you know, having those mocks, the same questions kept coming up, and because you've practiced that and had those mocks, you then had that repertoire of answers that you knew, like, oh yes, I know how to answer this. So it made it easier, the actual real interview.
Okay. Miles, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think, yeah, again, what Lewis said, I think the final interview sort of flew by. I think it was, and it felt a lot more sort of not necessarily informal, but it was almost you're speaking to your client and you're having a conversation with your client, rather than someone that is there to, you know, put you on the spot and try and trip you up. Like, normally the assessors want you to pass. They're just trying to get you to in that area to pass. They're not trying to trip you up, sort of thing.
That's good. And so, Sophie, what about yourself? Was there did it meet your expectations interview, or was it a bit of a surprise, some of it?
I mean, naturally, I think, you know, as Lewis said, like, you know, everyone's got a different style for what they like and questioning. I had some that were overlapped, some that I was like, I don't know where that's come from. But it's just, yeah, I guess how you answer that and how you respond to those questions.
I think the key is to actually very quickly think, how do they want me to answer that question? And if you don't answer it in a way they want, or you think they're not on the right strand, I think they'll interrupt you and say, no, I'm looking for this information. What can you tell me about this? So they're there to help you, but at the same time, you need to know your stuff. And something I say to a lot of candidates, and you've heard it all before, but if you fail to prepare to fail, because it's only by being fully prepared that you'll be in a strong position. Okay, at this point, I'm going to just encourage people to drop any questions into the chat, and then Joe can pick up on those. But we'll carry on with a couple of questions for ourselves. So Lewis, did you get stuck on any question during your APC, and how did you recover from that position? Is there anything in particular that caught you off guard?
I can't remember particular questions, but there were some that came to me, and I just sort of went blank. But I think in those moments you've got to, and this is important, to have your notepad next to you, making sure you can make a quick note of that question. And if you really can't think of the answer, make a note of what the question was, or maybe a key word that came into your head in answering that question you thought about. And then at the end of the interview, they will give you the opportunity, obviously, to refer back to that. And I think then that time you can spend in trying to answer that question. Maybe then the time you've moved on, and maybe it will re-jog your memory and hopefully help you to be able to answer that question.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why they say you're allowed a blank pad and a pen and a glass of water. You write things down, and it's amazing how your mind is ticking away in the background. And when it comes to the end, you say, oh, by the way, I wanted to say this at that point, and that's a good way to recover. Miles, was there anything from a QS point of view that caught you on the hop, as it were?
Yeah, so actually, so in terms of the notepad, I actually wrote 3 questions down. So 2 of them came back. I came back to at the end, and I was able to answer them. There was one of them that I had to again practice how to answer a question that you maybe don't know. So I had to refer them to a particular guidance note. And I said I would have to take it away, read the guidance note. I'm aware of where to find it. Which, from what I understand from sort of mock interviews, that was one of the feedbacks, is that, again, if you're in a meeting with a client and you don't know the answer, what would you do? You wouldn't just say, I don't know. You say, I'll take it away, refer to the contract, or refer to a guide.
Absolutely. And of course, that's always better than the worst thing to do is actually guess and get it wrong, because then effectively you don't know that you're giving wrong advice, but the assessors will certainly know you are. So yeah, it's perfectly okay to say that, and the fact you're referring to a guidance note, clearly you know where, you're a safe pair of hands, you know where to go and look at it, sort of thing. So yeah, great. Sophie, was there anything that caught you, any curve balls from your point of view in the APC questioning?
I would say the only thing that really caught me off guard was probably in the ethics section. So the chair was asking the question, and it was kind of a situational kind of based question, and I can't remember for the life of me what the question was, and it just wasn't providing me with enough or sufficient information for me to accurately kind of provide my advice. And obviously, naturally, when you go into the ethics section, you want to get every single question right, and he just wasn't giving me the most amount of details. So I just basically went back to him and was like, well, on the basis of it being like this, then I would advise this. If it was on the basis of this, then I would advise this. So I would say that's the only thing. And I think that was, I don't know if it was intentionally done. I don't know if I actually just made it more difficult for myself, and he was just like, I'm just gonna let you roll with it. So yeah, I would say that's the only thing that caught me off guard.
I think that's a key thing. A lot of people find the ethics questioning the hardest, because ultimately your experience, which you have experienced, you have written it down, and they're asking questions on that. You can visualize it. You can actually think of yourself there. What did you do? Why did you do that? Whereas with ethics, as you said, a lot of the questions are hypothetical, because you may not have been involved with money laundering or bribery, but they're asking you questions. What would you do in this situation? Because although you may not have experienced it, you could come across that in the next day or next week as part of your work. So yeah, the ethics are certainly ones where ultimately it's the same question but rephrased and wraps up in a nice little story, which you then have to unpick. Just suppose you met this person who said this, what would you do, sort of thing. So you're right, you need to think, what is the underlying question that they're actually asking you? Okay, so Lewis, what's your top tip advice for those taking the APC in the near future? So if there's any on the call who are sitting either this session 1, which could be next month or June, what's the top tip advice you give sort of a matter of weeks out from the APC?
I think I would say your case study and your summary of experience is your Bible. Just know that inside out, and I would say if you can get some revision time off, get a couple of days off before the week before, get as much time off as you can. I mean, I took my annual leave and some revision days, and I had nearly 9 days before the APC, and I was just head down every day revising mock interviews and question and answers with whatever was available with anyone. So yeah, just try and get that complete reflection, switch off from work completely, and get your head totally into the APC the week or 2 weeks before.
I bet that was the best holiday you've ever had, wasn't it?
The best, yeah. I've always wanted to use my APC. I'll leave for APC.
Best time off work. You're absolutely right there, because if there's a crisis at work or a distraction, you don't really want to be trying to manage that and manage obviously your APC as well. So no, that's a good little tip there. Miles, what's your top tip advice for those taking their APC in the next few weeks?
again, to echo what Lewis said, and you need to know your documents back to front, really. It is your Bible. You know, if you're asked a question and you maybe don't know, try not to guess. But as well as that, sort of use your network to arrange mocks, informal Q&As, any feedback, sort of even these type of sessions with anyone, any colleagues, or, you know, there's LinkedIn groups, anything. So one, yeah, use your network, and two is make sure you know your documents inside out.
I think that's good, and also just on the mock, I think having mocks with different people, because if you're having a mock with the same person all the time, they're going to interpret your submission in a certain way. They'll have a certain question they're going to ask you. When you've got someone else who it may be the same question, but they phrase it in a different way, or it's just a different, you know, way it's presented. Because ultimately, when you come to your interview, you're going to be presented with 3 people on the call: the chairman and the 2 assessors. You will never have met them before, and they will have not met you. So it's good to actually have mock interviews with people you've never met before. It formalises it a bit. So, Sophie, what top tip advice would you give for those taking the APC in the next sort of matter of weeks?
Yeah, really just echoing, know your submission, annotate your submission, like ballpark sort of, or try and assume where questions might be, have different people with Q&As, but also take the time out to not burn yourself out, you know, take some time out. Sometimes you can just be sat there, you know, and nothing's actually going in. So just make sure you're, you know, looking after yourself as well whilst you're revising, because it is a lot.
Excellent. If I can just throw another top tip in, which and I found this from people, and that is understand what 10 minutes is, because your presentation is 10 minutes. And in mock interviews, I know people who have spoken for, you know, a time, and I say, how long do you think your presentation was? And they think, oh, about 10 minutes. And I said, well, it was actually 14 minutes, 35 seconds. How do you know that? Well, I had a clock. You know, you need to know what is 10 minutes, because one of the key things is your presentation is 10 minutes. So my top tip would be practice your presentation and make sure it does not go over 10 minutes, because then you'll be introducing unnecessary stress at the chairperson, saying, unfortunately, we're going to have to stop your presentation there and start the questioning because it's a tight time schedule. So yeah, but no, good tips, and thanks for that. So Joe, what questions have we got from the room?
Well, funnily enough, the first one was actually on top tip, so it's good that we've just gone through that actually. But there's quite a few in here. I won't do them word for word, but there's one from Tom. I think the question he's asking, from what I understand, is that he's asking the assessment, is it more of a kind of holistic view of the whole interview? You know, can you get questions wrong and still pass? Where's the sort of line of you're referred or you've passed? I think that's the crux of the question there from Tom.
Okay, so if I just briefly answer that, it is a holistic assessment. They're looking at you in the round. Okay, to some of your questions, there's not a right or wrong answer. Some questions are binary. So, for instance, they may ask you, what is the minimum level of professional indemnity insurance cover you need? Okay. Now, I can ask one of our panel that question, because I'm sure they will. So, Miles, what's the minimum level of professional indemnity insurance you need?
You're put me on the spot now. So it depends on the turnover. So
right, but as a minimum though, if your turnover will say less than 100,000, what's the minimum cover?
I believe it's 250k.
250k, correct answer. Now, ultimately, Joe, as you see there is only one answer. So if you said it's 1 million, or if it's 5 million, yeah, you have to know certain specific things. And I'm sure Sophie will know some legislation which you have to specifically know. And if you don't get it right, in theory, it can be seen as negative in the overall end assessment. But at the end of the interview, as long as you've answered the questions, you've actually communicated back to the assessors, they take a holistic view. And as long as there's nothing which is, quite a serious error of judgment, such that you could not be considered chartered out in the industry, and they then refer you through, and they give you a referral report, which will be for focusing on that. So ultimately, you would be a better surveyor at the end of it by working on areas which you weren't strong on in interview.
Thanks for that, David.
Hope that helps, Tom, wherever you are.
And we got another question here, which I'll summarise as well. I think the question's really asking, is there such a thing as going into too much detail when responding to a question? Are you kind of better giving a more concise answer and letting the assessor question you further? You know, can you give too much detail and actually leave yourself open for more questions, if that makes sense?
Okay, so I'll ask our little esteemed panel here. So Lewis, were you cut across when given an answer and they said we'll have to move on?
Yeah. So if they feel like
there we go.
So
what happened there is Lewis had clearly given them confidence in his answer and they didn't want to hear any more. Yeah. So do you want to expand on that, Lewis? Just what particularly you were saying or something?
I can't remember what particularly any of the questions, but certainly, you know, in mock interviews where I was giving too much information, and you know, just give short, succinct answers, because what you're doing yourself is opening up to potentially more questioning, or the panel may be coming back with another question which you're then answering already, so you're almost giving too much information. So I would, yeah, just only answer the question that's being asked of you, and they may follow up with lead up questions which will obviously take up more time of the interview.
Absolutely. I think the key thing there, and everyone needs to understand this, the agreement which the assessors have signed up to is they have to ask you a question on every competency. So if you're answering and taking 10 or 15 minutes on one competency to ask a question, clearly you're not allowed, you know, they need to get, so you're going to get 2 or 3 questions, probably a maximum of 2 or 3 minutes, 4 minutes on each competency. So it is fast fire, and that's what I suppose we're trying to simulate here, Joe, isn't it? Sort of thing. Very quick and punchy answers. You know, why did you advise this? I advised this because the client was looking for this solution, and I felt this was the best. Okay, great. What was there any other option you could look at? And you can give another answer. Yeah, but very quickly they'll get confidence in you are what you say you are, and clearly you can give a further question answer backup. Next one, Joe.
Thanks, David. Probably quite a punchy answer here from Neil. How long before the assessment do the assessors get your submission? I presume there's a reason Neil wants to know that, but that's the question.
Okay, so as an assessor, I mean, this is how it all works really. I've already submitted dates which I am available during the assessment window, and normally 2 weeks before the actual assessment, you will be sent the papers, or for 3 weeks, that you'll be told you are on this panel and these are the candidates you're interviewing. Okay. The key thing there is, as an assessor, you have to confirm there's no conflicts of interest, i.e., let's just go back 12 months and you know, I knew Sophie through, you know, TFL or wherever. If Sophie was a candidate on a panel I was assessing, I'd say, unfortunately, I cannot assess Sophie because of conflicts of interest. I may have done a mock interview with her or something, you see. So they set the panels, and then the documents there. We download them. We are just downloading the submission that you had uploaded yourself. So that's where it's the same submission. But we get those generally 2 weeks before the interview, no further than that. And yeah, so that's the timeline.
Thanks, David. A good question here from Sarah. She's asked whether the ethics section always consists of scenario-based questions, or does it depend, or will they always ask you a scenario-based question? I think, like Sophie had mentioned.
So Sophie, do you want to sort of expand on that bit? Was it all scenarios, or did you have some sort of more theoretical questions?
No, it was a mix. I mean, to be honest, it was a bit weird. It was a bit weird of a section, to be honest. I look back and I'm like, I don't actually know what that was. To be honest with you, to be quite transparent, yeah, it was a mix. It was like, you know, name me. I think they actually previously mentioned the ethical standards rather than the rules of conduct, and then that was like, I can name you the 5 rules of conduct. Do you want me to do that? And then they just let me reel off the whole 5, where I was expecting them to sort of cut me off. But I was like, okay, I'll talk. We'll use this 10 minutes.
Just to give an example, I don't say to people, tell me all 5, because ultimately that's time wasting and it's very boring. I just say, pick one, tell me what it is, and tell me how you act in accordance with that in your day-to-day work. You see, so that's an example where I'm not saying, list out, number 1 is integrity. So you may say, rule number 1, act with integrity. And as an example, that when I was at work, I did this, you see. So there we go. Miles, is there any ethical questions that through you as a QS?
So for one of the ones I sort of got stuck on was around the ethics decision tree. So if you're proposed an ethical issue, should we say? So there is this thing called the ethics decision tree. So I was quizzed on what it is and what sort of the contents were.
Absolutely.
Eventually got it.
For everyone on the call, there are 2 decision trees. Lewis, can you tell me what the other decision tree is?
Actually, to be honest. Sorry.
Okay, so there's a CPD decision tree and there's an ethical decision tree. Yeah. Everyone on this call who has not taken an APC needs to have looked at those and make reference to them. Because one of the questions I ask is, are you aware of the ethical decision tree? And someone will say yes. And of course, that's a great answer. And I say, okay, can you give me one of the questions that is on the ethical decision tree? And that's when you then find out whether the candidate actually knows what an ethical decision tree or not is. So yeah, that covers that one, I think, Joe.
That was the exact question I got asked, actually. So funny enough.
And I didn't interview either. So there we go.
Cool. Just going to apologise because we're getting quite a lot of questions, so I might not be able to get through all of them, but I'm just picking some out here. We got another question that's asking how, this might be one for you, David, perhaps actually, but how do you go about finding a supervisor if you don't have one in your company that's suitable, and can your counsellor be your supervisor too?
Okay, so if I just give you the sort of the official way, then maybe the panel maybe expand on their own experience. Your supervisor is someone who works with you and supervises your work. Yeah, so they don't have to be an RICS surveyor. So for instance, I have a candidate and they're working with a groundworks contractor. They're a QS working for a contractor. They're the only QS in the company and they want to be chartered. Their supervisor happens to be their project manager, line manager, delivering the projects. Ultimately, they are supervising that they are getting the experience that is required. But it's the candidate who has to ask them, I need experience in this area or that area. What is most important is the counsellor. The counsellor does not have to be within your organisation, but they have to be a chartered surveyor. And they're the ones who basically are signing your submission off at the end. And they'll say, look, you really need some experience in this area. I would suggest you talk to your supervisor at work and try and ask them for this experience. So I think the key person there with all this whole process is your counsellor is there to help sign you off and support you, but your employer, and I use that as an employer, they're the person who helps you. Now you may be working for yourself, a sole trader, in which case your counsellor is going to be even more important. You are effectively your own supervisor if you're a sole trader working for yourself. So Lewis, is that your experience yourself with supervisors and counsellors?
Yeah, certainly day to day, supervising you, overseeing, and then the counsellor, you sort of have a regular meeting maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks, to then sort of come back to them and get a second opinion, almost a second review of your work, and get a second set of eyes, effectively.
Yeah. And what about yourself, Miles? Was that what your experience was?
Yeah, the same. So what actually happened, my counsellor was my supervisor, but our internal APC process has a separate management thing, so we sort of supervisor came through that as well.
Yeah. And Sophie, what were you at TfL when you were taking your APC?
Yeah. So my head of sector as such was my counsellor, and then my day-to-day reporting manager was my supervisor.
Right. Okay. So yeah, clearly you're working in organisations which have got an existing structure, but I know there is quite a few candidates come forward who are not in such a a supported environment, and that's where external people, even Property Elite, and there are other organisations which can provide sort of a mentoring and also a counselling service as well for those who have not got that facility in house. Joe, we've got time for another question, have we?
Yeah, we'll go to a question from Joe, who is sitting his APC next Tuesday morning, and he'd like to know from the panel, what's your suggestion for him on Monday to sort of get in the right headspace? You know, is there anything he should be doing the day before to sort of perform well, perform the best on the day?
I'll kick off by saying don't go out on the lash the night before with your mates. Have an early night. But I'll let Lewis come up with a bit more of a structured answer for the Monday. What would he do on Monday?
Yeah, certainly making sure at least 2 or 3 days before getting, you know, regular sleep, making sure you're getting at least to bed, I don't know, 9:30 maybe at least, I would say. And then making sure you're eating well, just good clean food. And then, yeah, I think the day before, have a quick look over, don't go too mad. Any of your, you know, the parts you're not most confident on, have a quick refresh of those, but don't go too in depth, and, you know, go for a quick walk or whatever, but then, yeah, get an early night and have good rest and well eaten, I would say.
Miles, what did you do the day before your interview?
It was just a case of rereading any revision notes, just have a look at the documents, and then I think I actually took the afternoon off, so it was yeah, go and have a break and enjoy yourself, but don't enjoy yourself too much. But yeah.
So Sophie?
Yeah, just get an early night, I would say. You know, don't do too much. I think I flicked over a few things that I was sort of not still sort of a bit rusty on, and yeah, just check that nothing monumental has happened in RICS between the last time you checked and when you're about to sit tomorrow. And if anything in the economy's gone absolutely crazy,
Absolutely,
yeah, that would be the only thing that I would say. But yeah, just don't go mad with it. It's not worth it.
I'd also suggest if make sure you got your your tie and your jacket if you're a guy, and you know get your clothes all sorted, what you're going to wear, where you're going to do the interview. If it's a room at an office, make sure you have reserved the room and no one's going to be barging in halfway through. If it's at home, make sure you're not going to get an Amazon delivery knocking on the door halfway through your call. So just remove all distractions, make sure you're comfortable with the environment, and then when you wake up, you're just into the zone, as it were. You're not rushing around looking for a tie or trying to find a room in the office to actually do your interview in. So again, preparation is everything, and it just removes the stress. Joe, back to you.
Perfect. Well, I think I've not been able to get through every question, but we are at the time mark now. So I suppose in keeping with the APC process, we will wrap it up on time on the dot. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and I hope it's been really useful for those who have come here and to find out a bit more about the process. And thanks to David and the panel for taking the time out of their day as well to host this and answer some questions. As David said, if there are people on here who need a bit more assistance, then Property Elite can help, and other such companies. So apologies for those who I haven't been able to ask the questions, but yeah, there are facilities out there for people to get some further assistance with the process if required. So yeah, thank you all again for your time.
Thanks, Joe. And I think there may be a recording of this. I'm not sure, can't promise, but anyway, I'll let you manage that and circulate it to the attendees. And yeah, best of luck, everyone. And Lewis, Miles, and Sophie, hope that wasn't too traumatic in reliving your assessment. But anyway, congratulations to you, and good luck to everyone else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.